The Arizona sun hit the hood of that brand new Porsche like a spotlight on my humiliation. My daughter stood there smiling, her hand resting on the car door, while my own credit card sat in her husband's wallet. I remember the metallic smell of the dealership, the sound of a pen scratching across paper, and the sudden, hollow silence inside my chest. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes betrayal wears the face you love most. I was still wearing my hospital wristband from chemo when they drove off, laughing. That was the day I realized love can blind you until it robs you clean. Let me show you how it all began. I never imagined I'd be the one driving a brand new Porsche down the open road. Wind brushing against my face. Finally feeling free. While my daughter and her husband sat in jail. People see the car and think it's a story of luxury. But for me, it's a story of betrayal and rebirth. It all began on a quiet afternoon, just after my final chemotherapy session. My body was weak, but my heart felt light. I thought the worst was finally over. My daughter Emily had offered to drive me home, and her husband Ryan tagged along. I remember the Arizona sun glaring across the windshield, and for a fleeting moment, I felt grateful, believing I was surrounded by family, by love. Then, without warning, they stopped at a dealership. I didn't think much of it until I watched my own credit card slide across the counter. A Porsche, his dream car, paid for with my money. Emily laughed softly, saying something about how I wouldn't need it much longer. In that moment, something inside me shattered, not just my trust, but the illusion that love and loyalty were unbreakable. I sat there in silence, realizing that the people I had raised, the ones I would have died for, saw me as nothing more than a fading bank account. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. When my last chemotherapy session ended, I remember stepping outside and feeling the Arizona sun against my skin. Warm, almost too bright, but alive. After months of hospitals, needles, and waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and fear, that sunlight felt like forgiveness. I thought life was finally giving me back a second chance. My little home in Tucson had always been simple, but after cancer, it felt like a sanctuary. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the faint scent of desert sage drifting through the open window. Everything felt sharper, more precious. I'd wake early, make tea, and sit by the window just to watch the desert wake up. The stillness, the silence. It was my way of remembering that I had survived. Emily and Ryan had been there through it all. They handled appointments, groceries, the endless paperwork. I was grateful. I told myself their presence was love. Ryan carried my bags when I was too weak to lift them. Emily made soup that tasted like my mother's. But slowly, I began to sense something shifting. Their help became management. My gratitude turned into guilt. They began making small decisions without asking, about my insurance, my bank, even my medications. I told myself it was just concern, that I was lucky to have family who cared so deeply. Still, some nights, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I'd somehow handed over too much of myself during those months of sickness. Maybe I'd made them believe I couldn't stand on my own anymore. Maybe I'd started to believe that too. But as my strength returned, I felt a quiet determination growing again, the same one that got me through chemo. I remember thinking how good it would feel to take a drive with them, to celebrate being alive, to let go of the fear that had been sitting in my chest for so long. That morning, when Emily offered to drive me home, I didn't think twice. I had no idea that what I believed was a gesture of love would turn into the moment everything fell apart. The drive home that day felt peaceful at first, the kind of quiet that only comes after surviving something unbearable. My body was weak, still trembling from the chemo, but my mind was light. I remember resting my head against the window, watching the Arizona desert stretch endlessly, golden light, scattered cacti, the hum of tires on hot asphalt. Emily was talking softly in the front seat. Ryan was driving. For the first time in months, I thought maybe life would start to feel normal again. We stopped for coffee along the way. They laughed about plans for the weekend, a barbecue, maybe a drive up north once I felt stronger. I smiled, letting the sound of their voices fill the empty spaces that cancer had left behind. I wanted so badly to believe we were all healing together. Then Ryan slowed down as we passed a Porsche dealership. The building glimmered in the afternoon sun, glass walls reflecting the light like a jewel box. I noticed how his eyes lingered, how his hands tightened slightly on the wheel. Emily saw it too and smiled at him. That knowing kind of smile between people who share a secret. She said they should just take a look, that it wouldn't hurt. I didn't mind. I thought we were just browsing, passing time. Inside, the air was cool, smelling faintly of leather and newness. Salesmen moved like dancers in pressed suits, and the cars gleamed beneath spotlights. Ryan circled a deep red Porsche, tracing his fingers along the hood. Emily stayed close to him, whispering things I couldn't hear. I stood back, leaning on my cane, watching with quiet amusement. I remember thinking how young they still were, how full of energy, how lucky I was to have them in my life. Then I heard it, the sound of my own name at the counter, the rustle of my purse opening, my credit card sliding across the counter. At first, my mind refused to make sense of it. My name, my card, Ryan's signature on the slip, the salesman smiling, Emily's hand resting casually on his arm. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I felt frozen, like the world had been drained of sound. Then Emily turned to me, her voice calm, almost cheerful. She said something about how it was fine, how I wouldn't need the money for long. The words hit me like cold water. For a moment, everything stopped. The ticking clock on the wall, the hum of the air conditioner, even the beat of my own heart. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My daughter, my only child, had just handed away a part of me as if I were already gone. All those nights she'd sat beside my hospital bed, brushing my hair, holding my hand. I replayed them in my mind and realized they were gone too. I stood there, small and invisible, while they laughed with the salesman. I remember the shimmer of the car's red paint, the way it glowed like blood in the sunlight. I remember Ryan revving the engine, his face bright with triumph. When they pulled away, I stayed there on the sidewalk, clutching my empty purse. The sound of that engine faded down the road, but the silence it left behind was louder than anything I'd ever known. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there, staring at the place where they'd been, feeling the last thread of something sacred unravel inside me. And in that silence, something else took root, Not anger yet, not even grief, just a quiet awareness that love, once broken like that, could never return the same. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the faint shadow of the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but presses down like a weight. My body ached from treatment, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I kept seeing it, the swipe of my card, the gleam of that red Porsche, the way Emily smiled like it was just another errand. For hours, I tried to make sense of it. I told myself there had to be some misunderstanding, that maybe she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't a single moment. It was the final piece in a puzzle I'd been avoiding for years. I thought about my late husband, John. He used to tell me that love is not about surrender. It's about respect. He'd always warned me to stay independent, to never let gratitude turn into dependency. But somewhere between my illness and Emily's concern, I had started handing over my strength piece by piece. Every time I said, "It's fine," when she made a decision for me, I built the cage I was now sitting in. As the hours passed, the pain softened into something else, a kind of cold, clear awareness. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't dying. I was alive, and I still had choices. Around 2:30 a.m., I sat up and turned on the small lamp beside my bed. The light was harsh after hours of darkness, but it felt right, like truth finally finding a way in. I reached for my laptop, my hands trembling not from weakness this time, but from purpose. I opened my email and searched for Linda, my financial advisor. That was the moment it shifted, when grief turned into motion. I realized strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it starts in silence, with a single decision to stop being the victim of your own kindness. The next morning, I woke to a stillness that felt different. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was focus. The kind of calm that comes when the worst has already happened, and there's nothing left to lose except fear. I made a cup of coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. My hands didn't tremble this time. I wasn't the same woman who stood speechless outside that dealership. I started with Linda, my financial advisor. I'd known her for years, through good times and terrible ones. When I explained what had happened, the unauthorized purchase, the card, the betrayal, I kept my tone steady. No tears, no anger, just facts. I could almost hear my daughter's careless laughter in my head, but I forced myself to focus on precision. Linda's voice softened when she told me this wasn't hopeless. She said the charge could be reported as fraud, that it could trigger an investigation. Those words, fraud and investigation, felt like the first real breath I'd taken in days. For the first time, the power wasn't all on their side. When I hung up, I sat there in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space around me. I looked at my late husband's photograph on the shelf. I could almost hear his voice reminding me that real strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, "Do what needs to be done." That's when I called Detective Paul Harris, a friend of John's from years ago. He'd helped us once when a business partner had tried to cheat John after his accident. I told him everything, not as a victim, but as someone ready to act. I didn't have to ask if he believed me. I could hear it in his tone. The quiet respect that comes when someone recognizes the truth behind your words. He promised to look into it, to get the paperwork started. When I ended that call, I sat back and felt something shift deep inside me. A small, steady flame of control. For months, I'd lived as if my time was running out. But that morning, I realized I wasn't counting the days anymore. I was shaping them. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Justice never is. But as I closed my laptop, I felt an almost peaceful certainty settle over me. My life wasn't ending. It was about to begin again, on my own terms. That morning, I woke before the sun. The air in Tucson was cool and still, that soft, golden quiet before the desert heat wakes up. I made myself coffee, dressed in simple clothes, and looked in the mirror for a long time. The woman staring back wasn't fragile anymore. Her eyes were steady, her shoulders squared. There was peace there, not revenge, not anger, just the calm certainty of someone who finally remembered her own worth. I drove to the same Porsche dealership, the one I'd been too stunned to move in weeks before. As I stepped inside, the scent of leather and polish filled the air, just as it had that day. But everything felt different now. The glass walls, the hum of the engines, they didn't intimidate me anymore. I walked past the same model Ryan had chosen, that same deep red gleaming under the lights, and smiled. I didn't flinch this time. I sat with the salesman, asked questions, signed the papers myself. Every pen stroke felt deliberate, not about the car, but about taking back what was stolen: my dignity, my independence, my voice. I didn't raise my tone or make a statement. I didn't need to. Power, I realized, doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it's quiet and unmistakable. When I pulled into my driveway, the afternoon sun caught the red paint just right. Emily was outside watering her plants. She froze when she saw me step out of the car, her face pale, her lips parted. The same disbelief I'd once worn at that dealership. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, thanked her for checking the mail, and walked inside. Later, as I drove down the open desert road, wind slipping through my hair, I felt lighter than I had in years. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, no longer something to fear, but something to chase. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the sun was dipping low, painting everything in gold. Emily was standing outside, still frozen from the shock of seeing me in a brand new Porsche, the same model she and Ryan had bought with my card. I could almost see the storm of emotions crossing her face. Disbelief, guilt, then anger trying to disguise itself as concern. But I wasn't the same woman she'd once known. I felt calm, centered, as if I had been waiting for this exact moment, not to fight, but to finally speak the truth. I stepped out of the car and looked at her, really looked at her, the little girl I had once tucked into bed. Now standing before me as a stranger I barely recognized. My heart ached, but it didn't break. I told her I knew everything about the purchase, the lies, the assumption that my life was nearly over. I told her how it felt to sit there that day, invisible in the passenger seat, watching her erase the years of love and sacrifice we had shared. For a long time, I thought silence was love. I thought letting her have her way was kindness. But standing there, I realized it wasn't love at all. It was fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of conflict. Fear of being alone. And that fear had allowed her to believe that my devotion had no limits. I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. I told her that I would no longer be paying her bills, no longer rescuing her from her own choices. She needed to learn what it meant to stand on her own, just as I had. Her eyes filled with tears, but mine didn't. I wasn't cold, just done. There's a difference. I wished her well, truly, and walked inside. That evening, as I watched the desert fade into night through my living room window, I felt the quietest kind of freedom. The kind that comes when you stop begging to be understood and start standing in your own truth. It was early afternoon when the call came. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that feels earned after a long storm. Detective Harris's voice was steady, professional, but there was something softer beneath it when he told me the news: Ryan had been arrested. Fraud, identity misuse, multiple financial offenses. The investigation had uncovered far more than just the Porsche. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the sunlight stretching across the floor, and felt nothing at first. Then, slowly, the weight began to lift. Not joy, not victory, just relief. It's strange. When justice finally arrives, it doesn't come with fireworks. It's quieter than you imagine. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. And yet, knowing that truth had finally caught up to them, that felt like closure. In the days that followed, I learned more. Ryan had been using my information for months. Small transfers, falsified authorizations, little things I had missed during treatment. The investigation revealed everything, and the bank reversed the losses. Emily tried to plead ignorance, but she couldn't deny her part in it, and I didn't need to say anything more. The law spoke for me. What no one ever knew, what I never told them, was that my late husband, John, had prepared for something like this. Years before he passed, he set up a private trust in my name, managed through a quiet account in Montana. It wasn't extravagant, but it was secure, untouchable. I had always kept it to myself, using only the basics, never flaunting it. I suppose part of me wanted to see who loved me without knowing about it. Now I had my answer. Ryan's greed had destroyed him. Emily's silence had bound her to it. But me, I was free. My future was safe, not because of money, but because I had finally reclaimed my own self-respect. I stood outside that evening, watching the Arizona sunset fade into violet. The desert stretched endlessly before me, open, quiet, alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Looking back now, I see that everything that happened, the pain, the betrayal, the silence, was never meant to destroy me. It was meant to wake me up. My heart broke, yes, but it also opened. It forced me to see where I had given too much, trusted too blindly, and confused love with sacrifice. Losing what I thought I needed gave me back what I had lost, myself. I used to think strength came from holding everything together, from forgiving endlessly. But real strength, I learned, is knowing when to let go, when to stop explaining your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the weight of what others did to you. Now, I live quietly. I manage my affairs, take long drives through the desert, and talk to my late husband in the soft stillness of morning. I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful for his wisdom, for the lessons that hurt, and for the peace that came after. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this: don't wait for someone to value you before you start valuing yourself. Love deeply, but never at the cost of your own dignity. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or a moment that forced you to start over, share your thoughts below. Maybe your story will help someone else find their strength too.